Everybody. So welcome to another chapel service, and we are deviating from our four-part series on understanding, hey, what's in my Bible, because it's the holiday season. And I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of have a special message, a little holiday chapel service. And so we just came out of Thanksgiving. We've got the Merry Christmas season coming up. And I know that this time, from about November, we'll just say roughly 23rd, 24th, through about January 2nd, calories don't count during those days, all right? Now, you might have to work out a little extra, but don't worry about those calories, because there's going to be lots of goodies. I know I had more than my fair share on Thanksgiving, and I'm afraid the same thing's going to happen on Christmas, very inevitably. And so, with this season of merriment and Thanksgiving, I wanted to share with you guys one of the messages that has been most encouraging in my life to help keep me thankful, to help keep me merry, and to just help keep me positive in general. I want to share with you guys what I will propose is the key to having the best day ever. The best day ever. And so to do that, I want to introduce you to, there we go, two really short songs. Now, I am no Michael Bublé, so please look over how off-key I might be singing this. But I just want to offer two that's just one verses. You can take these and you can YouTube these, right? These are kind of like VBS hymnals. This is where I heard this was Vacation Bible School growing up. So these are kind of children's songs, but they have lasting value. I sing them, I'm not exaggerating, I sing these daily. I won't say that it's the first words out of my mouth when I wake up in the morning, but at least once every day, I'm singing one of these two songs, all right? And so the first one comes directly from Psalm 118, verse 24. And I'll read it first. This is the day, it's hard for me to even read this, that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And so growing up in Vacation Bible School, we would kind of sing it like this. This is the day that the Lord has made, that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it, and be glad in it. That's it. It's very simple. Hey, thank you. Thank you. Now the second one, now again, Vacation Bible School, I'm going to tell you about my friend Bob Crawford here in a second, but he was always our song leader for Vacation Bible School, and he would always do these two songs together. If you listen to a classic rock radio and you hear We Will Rock You, and it's always followed immediately by We Are the Champions, without fail, and Queen recorded those songs to be played together. That was kind of their intent. And so a lot of disc jockeys, they honor that intent, that you always find those together. So this is how, growing up, I always sang these two songs together. So I would go right from that first song, that Psalms 118, and I would launch into this one. Well, we would launch into this one. It's, I love the Lord Messiah deep down in my heart. So in song, it goes kind of like this. I love the Lord Messiah deep down in my heart. I love the Lord Messiah deep down in my heart. I say deep, deep. I say down, down. I say deep down in my heart. I say deep, deep. I say down, down. I say deep down in my heart. So there's that song. And so these two songs have encouraged me so much. Not just because of the words in the songs, but also because of the character behind the man who led these songs for me during Vacation Bible School growing up. And that's my friend Bob Crawford. He was a good spiritual mentor for me growing up. He's still alive to this day. I actually gave him a phone call not too long ago just to check in with him. And so Bob Crawford, he would always start every day of Vacation Bible School with these songs. Always. Back to back, always. And more than that, whenever he would preach on Sundays, so he would speak at my home congregation, he would be our guest speaker every third Sunday. He would start every sermon, every single one on Sunday, with the first song, with Psalms 118. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. This is the best day ever. You can quote that. That's how he would start every single sermon, every single Sunday that he preached. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. This is the best day ever. And now growing up, man, I can't tell you how encouraging Bob was, just because he was always so happy. He was always so energetic. And when you start off a sermon like that, it's hard to not be happy. It's contagious. And so I was just always amazed by how cheerful he was. And I was like, man, how does he do it? He doesn't have a care in the world. And then, as I grew up, I got a little bit older, became an adult, I learned what it was like to have responsibilities. I learned what it was like to have to balance schedules between work and school and family and do things like pay taxes. I learned all these adult things that are going on. And I also learned a little bit about body language as I got older. And between those combination of things, I started recognizing something, that when Bob would preach and he would start his sermons off with these messages, I started hearing just a little pause every once in a while in his voice. Just a little catch. And when he would preach on things like patience, I could hear just a little strain in his voice. When he would have a sermon on forgiveness, I would see just a little glistening in his eye. When he would give a sermon about the value of family, I could hear just a little tremble in his voice. That's when I started realizing, you know what? Bob's not a perfect human who has no cares in this world. Bob is someone who learned a very important lesson, that he never had to speak with words because he lived in an action. And that's being thankful is a choice. Just like courage in the face of danger is a choice. And thankfulness is best appreciated and best understood only when you're really going through a hard time in life and you actually have to make that choice. It's not courageous for me to step off of, go over to those steps and step down. That doesn't take a lot of courage. What does take a little courage is stepping off of a perfectly good airplane and falling 1,500 feet. That takes a little bit more courage. Well, it's easy to be thankful when things are going well, but are you really thankful when things start going bad? And so, knowing that I wanted to give a chapel message on this, that's the reason that I called Bob a couple weeks ago. I said, Bob, I got to know your secret. When and why did you starting your sermons with, "This is the day that the Lord has made, let us rejoice and be glad in it. This is the best day ever"? And I wasn't originally going to include his answer in my chapel message. I really just wanted to know for my own personal benefit, because I had another direction that I wanted to take this lesson. But when he told me his answer, I just threw the first draft in the trash, because his answer was, it's the chapel message. Okay, so his answer, he said, "Well, Tyler," now granted, he's like a grandfatherly age. He's kind of in his late 60s now. He had been doing this, he said, for about past 15 to 20 years. So it's not like he'd been doing it his whole life. And he said, as far as this is the best day ever, he said, about 12 years ago, one of his best friends he grew up with, they were like toddler best friends. Their entire life, they went to school together, they played on sports teams together, they actually co-coached high school sports teams together. Best friends. His best friend's dad had passed away. Unfortunate, of course. Now, I'll tell you the circumstances on that in just a second. But it was at this funeral that Bob was taught the important lesson of it's the best day ever. So Bob was there as good support for his friend. And he said, "How you holding up?" He said, "Bob, it's the best day ever." His dad had just died. He says, "What do you mean it's the best day ever? I know we're here to honor your dad, but best day ever, that's a pretty bold statement." He said, "Well, Bob, let me tell you how my dad died." He said the day he died, he was going fishing. Fishing was his favorite hobby. It's what he loved to do more than anything else when he could relax and have a moment to get away and go off to the lake. He had a boat, just a small little motorboat. And he said, "I talked to my dad that morning. And you know my dad, you know how he always says it's the best day yet. So, as he always does, we get off the phone, and he says, "Son, it's the best day yet. Love you, son. Bye." And he starts getting his boat ready to go out to the lake. Well, I don't know the full circumstances, and they might not even know. What happened was the boat had somehow fell off the trailer and crushed him, and that's how he died. And so Bob's best friend says, "Bob, Of course I'm hurting that my dad's gone. But I found comfort in knowing that quite possibly the last words he ever uttered in this life was, "It's the best day yet," because for him it was. See, he was a Christian. He was a very faithful man. He raised 3 Christian children who are still very dedicated in the Lord's church today. And he said he loved God more than anything else, more than fishing. For him, the day he died was the best day yet. He was talking about something that brought me to tears. Holy cow, what a story. So then he's like, okay, so let me tell you about, this is the day that the Lord has made. He said that one comes from another friend. He said that one comes from a mentor of mine who I looked up to when I was younger. And he always started his sermons that way. Every sermon started with that song. And he said, Tyler, it's kind of weird. Just like you called to ask me how I started this, I called to ask him one day why he started doing that. And he said, I won't go into all the details, but basically, this mentor of his said he was going through a really rough time in life. And again, it's just one of those low points. I don't know all the details, but he was going through a lot of hardship, a lot of trials. And he was a full-time preacher, and it was one of those things where he was starting to get to the point where he was questioning God a little bit. He's like, I'm just really struggling right now, and I don't understand. I serve God all the time. And he says, one morning I just woke up with this psalm just coming out of my mouth. I just started singing this song. And that's when I realized God gave me this day. God's the reason that I woke up today. This is the best day ever. This is the day that the Lord has made. I'm going to rejoice. I'm not going to be sad anymore. I'm not going to let the world get me down. I'm not going to let all my stress bring me down because God gave me this day. Why should I not celebrate? It's my choice to be thankful. And Bob understood that lesson. So that's when Bob started including this song at the start of every single one of his sermons. And so I think the real heart behind all this boils down to one key word when we look at scriptures. And that key word, if the clicker will catch up with the button press here. And still got turned on. Pause for the momentary delay. That's weird. Okay, well, hopefully it'll work on the next slide. It's Cairo. It's the root word for Eucharist, which some of you may be familiar with, especially if you come from a Catholic background. You know what the Eucharist is. Well, so what Cairo is, it's the root word it's used over 400 times in the New Testament that means thanks. It means rejoicing. From this one word, we get all of these following words: grace, gift, favor, gladness, joy, forgiveness, giving freely, being grateful, being thankful, giving thanks, for all from this one root word. Over 400 times. And in the imperative use of like a command, like, hey, give thanks, like the very action of giving thanks, it's used 38 times in reference to giving thanks to God. And so when we look at the usage of this, we can see that we have examples of Christ giving thanks. We also have commands to give thanks, and one of those commands comes from 1 Thessalonians 5:18. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God. Give thanks. That's an imperative. That's a command to do this. Personal opinion here. I think this is arguably one of the hardest verses in all of Scripture to live by. And I'll tell you why. Because when you have verses like love your enemies, that seems pretty hard. That's a pretty challenging verse. But you know what, God? If you want me to love my enemy, okay. I'll buy him a meal. God, if you want me to love my enemy, I'll give him a ride. I'll fill their gas tank. You know what? I might even crack a joke to try to make him smile if you want me to love my enemy. Those are all external things for someone else. But God, now you're telling me that I have to be thankful while I do it. When you love your enemies, you're focusing on the enemy outside. When you have to be thankful in doing it, you got to focus on the enemy inside. You got to overcome yourself for that. That means overcoming your pride. That means overcoming any other desires that you might have. You have to overcome yourself in order to be thankful in all circumstances. And that's why I think this is the hardest passage to live by. I'll give you a quick example here. Arguably one of, my wife obviously isn't here, so I'm not just saying this to get brownie points. I don't think she listens to these chapel messages. One of the happiest days of my life was when we got married. That was an awesome day. That was a very easy day for me to give thanks. That was a circumstance which I loved being thankful for. Fast forward about 2 days, we're on our honeymoon, I got a terrible head cold. I am just coughing and sneezing. I can barely breathe. I feel absolutely miserable. And then by the time I get over that, my wife caught some really weird stomach bug. And then so she was sick for the rest of the honeymoon. So we really did, we had about less than 36 hours to actually enjoy our honeymoon. We were sick the rest. It was a little bit harder to give thanks when we were both miserable for our honeymoon. Now a little bit more impactful one, and I shared with this a couple chapels ago, was my son. It's very easy to be thankful for a pregnancy. And so me and my wife were rejoicing. We're just so happy. We're looking forward to everything. I mean, we're getting everything ready. And then we get the news that, we think he's going to be stillborn because we think he's brain dead. That was one of the hardest days of my entire life. And one of the hardest things I had to do on that day, I'm in South Carolina when my wife tells me this news. One of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my entire life was with a calm and comforting voice tell my wife it's going to be okay. Because even with that news, I want to give thanks to God for everything that we still have. I want to give thanks to God that I was able to fly home to support her for our follow-up appointments. And I want to give thanks to God when those follow-up appointments showed that he's perfectly healthy. There's no answer for that change there other than God, okay? But the point is, even when circumstances are tough, we're to give thanks. So I just want to look at 2 times when Jesus gave thanks to wrap up this lesson, to kind of give you something to kind of take home and think about when we look at the ways that Jesus gave thanks. And so we look at one meal in which Jesus gave thanks. Okay, it seems to only be working about every other slide. That's very strange. We see that when Jesus was feeding the 5,000, he started this miracle off as Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish as much as they wanted. He started this off by giving thanks to God for the meal. He's got at least 5,000. We know it was 5,000 men. It could have been has 10,000, you include women and children. Okay, that's like this entire county worth of people, and he's feeding them. And before he starts feeding them, he gives thanks. But the significance of this giving thanks can only be really understood when you look at the day that Jesus had. You see, this day started off as a pretty rough day. So that morning, Jesus found out that his cousin, John the Baptist, was beheaded. Started out as a pretty rough day. But then the day only got better after that bad news. Say, Jesus, I'm going to argue we don't have scripture that says this. It's going to be a different sermon for why I think this. But I think Jesus was grieving on this day when he got that news. But then we see that his apostles come running to him because before this, he had given them kind of a great commission of sorts, a more selective commission. He sent his apostles out to perform miracles and heal the sick. And they're all returning to him now, and they're saying, Jesus, it's working. The power of the faith in this Holy Spirit, it's working in us. We're healing people. We're preaching the gospel message, and people are listening to us. That's some good news. So Jesus has this good news. And through this day, we see that Jesus continues preaching his own gospel as well, and he has this crowd of 5,000 people. So he himself is able to continue preaching. That's some good news. We see that, again, a crowd of upwards of 10,000 people, they all come to hear him. They give thanks for the meal to the point that all the people in this audience that were hungry, thousands of people, they're all hungry, and now they're all satisfied. They had enough to eat. That's something to be thankful for. And after this miracle is the first account that we have that Peter confesses Jesus as the Messiah. That is something to be thankful for. That's a good day. That would be like all of us in here right now dismissing and going out into the world and going and preaching Jesus, and then we come back tomorrow and we have 10,000 people here all to hear a message about Jesus. That's a good day. That's easy for Jesus to give thanks. But then, when we look at another meal, it's a little bit of a different story. We look at the Passover and the context around the Passover meal, and the institution of the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist, of the communion. We read this passage, and when the hour came, he reclined at table and the apostles with him, and he said to them, I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he said, take this and divide it among yourselves. And he took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And likewise the cup after they had eaten, saying, this cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood. Now the events around this meal and this time of Jesus giving thanks is a little bit different. You see, this day actually started out pretty good. A few days before this, he had just rose Lazarus from the dead. That's some good news. After raising Lazarus from the dead, many disciples, formerly disciples, started returning to him. He started having a crowd following him again. He enters Jerusalem with people like laying out the red carpet for him because they're starting to recognize him as the Messiah after he raises Lazarus from the dead. Like he's having a pretty good day. But then the day only gets worse. We see that the events surrounding this meal, his disciples, his apostles that are with him right there, they start arguing over who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. They start arguing over, hey Jesus, who's the best follower? You're gonna make me your right-hand man, right? They start ignoring all of the selfless teachings that he had just given. That's some bad news. Like, come on, guys. You should get this by now. See some more bad news in that Satan himself would enter two of Christ's apostles. Satan is to blame for Judas betraying Jesus. Jesus was betrayed for the price of 30 coins by one of his closest friends. That's some bad news. And then Peter, arguably one of the most devout of his apostles, denies him in order to have a safer life of his own. That's some bad news. When two of your closest friends betray you and deny you. And on this night, we know that he would be captured, he would be arrested, and then over the coming day, he's going to be subject to an unjust and unfair criminal trial. He's going to be whipped, he's going to be beaten mercilessly, and then he's going to be hung on the cross. That's a pretty bad day right there. And it's in those events that Jesus gives thanks. We can see that Jesus gave thanks in all circumstances. But Jesus' worst day is what enables us to have our best day. Because it's through his sacrifice, through his resurrection, that we can be reconciled with God. So that just like Bob's best friend's dad, who had his best day yet, we can have that type of hope. We can have that type of security. And I think that the key to this type of thankfulness is to trust in God. And I don't want to put words in the Bible that aren't supposed to be there, but I can't help but wonder if Jesus had this psalm in his mind on that day. He is not afraid of bad news. His heart is firm, trusting in the Lord. If you trust in God, you do not have to be afraid of bad news, no matter how bad it is. No one has ever had a day on this earth that was worse than Jesus' worst day. And he gave thanks. I'm going to say it's because he trusted in God. We see from Paul, book of Hebrews, without faith it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. Here's a little kind of pro tip for when you're doing your own Bible study. When you see words like faith and belief, they come from the exact same Greek word, which means trust. It's just kind of like a different context of that word. But both of them, faith and belief, carry the weight of placing your trust that God knows what's best in your life. Placing your trust in him to guide your every step. That is the depth behind these words, that we trust in him. And so, just a quick illustration here. So, how many people here have kids already? Got kids. Okay. How many here have parents? Whether you like them or not, that's a different story. We all got parents. Imagine if a child, think of yourself if you don't have kids, or think of your own kids if you do. Imagine if a child said, "Thanks, Mom, thanks, Dad," every time you gave them a rule or a punishment. Because they recognize that, oh, well, Mom and Dad's only doing this because they love me and they want what's best for me. So when they say, "Don't chew on the electrical cord," I've got a 7-month-old who's teething. They trust me that, hey, I probably shouldn't chew on this electrical cord. Or what if you got a teenager and you say, "You know what, curfew's 10 o'clock. You know what, you're not going to have a significant other in your bedroom." You start laying down rules like that, are they gonna say, "Hey, thanks for the rule. Thanks for looking out for me. Appreciate it. I'll follow you because I know that you love me and I'm trusting that you're looking out for me." That's the type of trust that we need in God. That's the type of trust that we're called to have. So now that leaves us with a little challenge. Do you want to have the best day ever? Today is the best day ever. But it's up to you to live up to that. It's up to you to be thankful and to rejoice for this day. To live recognizing the purpose that God has. Because you're thankful because you trust God. Because no matter what you're going through in life, no matter how low your lowest low has ever been or how high your highest high has ever been, you trust that God has a purpose for you. On your worst day, He has a purpose. On your best day, He has a purpose for you. And you trust that in His Word, He has given you every reason to not only believe Him, but to trust that this contains the key to understanding the purpose in your life. And we'll close with a prayer.